Hey guys, welcome to episode number 1 of my podcast. My name's Elijah Kraft, and today I had the chance to speak with one of my good friends and previous mentors as well, Zachary Alexander. He's a shadow work and men's coach approaching the work from a trauma-informed perspective. We had the chance to have a really good conversation today about a variety of different topics ranging from men's relationships to shamanism to the current state of global affairs to the experience of awakening. A blast and a exhilarating episode. It was a ton of fun to have this conversation and catch up with an old friend. I hope you guys enjoy it. And if you do, and if you received any value out of it, share it with a friend, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as well. It helps out the algorithm so much, and to get this good information out to other people as well who might resonate with it. That being said, enjoy the video.
Here's why.
Awesome. Well, Zach, welcome. It's a pleasure to see you once again after so much time has elapsed. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Excellent. Very excellent. So, man, thanks for hopping on the podcast. I wanted to put this on YouTube. I wanted to put this on Instagram because I've been putting out a lot more content myself, and I think there's a lot of intersection in the topics that we cover and the approach that we take to covering it. So without belaboring myself here, why don't you give the viewers a little bit about a little bit of background about yourself, about what you do and how you do it?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to mention that like we've known each other since you're one of the few people that's known me from the beginning of my career, right? Like, we met when you walked into the in-person healing center I worked at just randomly one night, and I just happened to be there. So we've kind of been on this journey together from the beginning, which I think it's super interesting that we're having this kind of collision course. So in terms of my career right now, I am call myself a trauma-informed men's coach, but I heavily specialize in shadow work and kind of incorporating spirituality in a means that's grounded and integrated. I think we have two polar opposites right now in terms of like men shy away from kind of a little bit of the esoteric spiritual nature of healing, or they're way too blasted off and they're pulling tarot cards and all that shit. And I think there's a way for the masculine to kind of embrace the nuance within spirituality that enhances one's life without getting too lost in either of those spectrums, right?
So you said a lot there.
Yeah.
and we and we have a lot to cover. And I'm deciding where to cut into this pie exactly, but why don't you talk a little bit about how you got into this space to begin with, and like why this is even important right now?
Yeah. So, how did I get into this space? That's a good question. And how do I condense it down into a few minutes? I had what you would call, I went on my own healing journey starting about a decade ago. I come from a history of heavy trauma, heavy childhood abuse. Around a decade ago, my body just gave out. I became bedridden, chronically ill. But around that time too, I started seeking out therapy for the first time. Had an amazing talk therapist for years that really guided me. Was able to kind of heal myself after being bedridden for several years. And through the help of that therapist, really understanding how the mental and emotional aspects were kind of tying in to my own body giving out. Returned to school, I've said this before, but build up the great life or whatever. Got engaged, had a great group of friends, got good grades finally after being like the equivalent of high school dropout, and got a full scholarship to a great law school. Around that time, I had a spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it. And I had to kind of really confront the parts of myself I didn't want to confront. It was very much in my face. I could no longer run or hide from how I was still acting off certain trauma responses, how I was running from certain emotions and pain. And around that time, I started training with shamanic healers. And I didn't even know what the fuck a shaman, I'm going to curse on your podcast. I didn't know what the fuck a shaman was before all that. And I kind of, was learning about like, what like the modern medicine woman or modern medicine man was. I did a semester of law school. It really did not work out. And then started my own in-person energy healing practice. Um, and at first it was kind of just a bunch of middle-aged white women named Kathy that came in wanting to know what a sacral chakra was. But I think, it wasn't, it was like, whatever, right? I was like the tall white guy in the sphere. So they were coming in. But then it started getting a lot more heavy. Then I started getting clients with heavy trauma backgrounds or who were having these awakenings and they didn't know where else to go. They had already exhausted all the resources within the mental health communities, right? And so they were coming to the law school dropout who called himself a fucking shaman, even though he's Jewish. And so slowly I built up my practice. Initially it was predominantly women. And then I started really focusing in on trauma healing and really grounding these esoteric shamanic modalities. And then I started recognizing that like men needed to be healed in a little bit of a different way, or men that were kind of more geared towards the masculine energy. And so that's when I kind of made my switch to men's coaching and, really wanted to find out how we can kind of bring these a little bit alternative healing modalities to the masculine.
So also you said a lot there, but that is an incredible story. For those viewers who don't know you and have the background on you, you were bedridden for like years on end during your 20s, right?
Yep.
And you caught some sort of virus in Africa or something, or shortly after you came back from Africa?
Yeah, second most deadly infectious disease in Africa behind only malaria. It's called schistosomiasis. And the medical community just could not figure it out like they did. I was stuck in an American medical community that really didn't have the awareness around these tropical illnesses. But I also had to figure out why I got sick and all the other foreigners in Africa didn't. What about my system, was vulnerable to this infection and other people weren't, right?
Did you ever find an answer to that? Or did you ever make meaning out of that experience?
Yeah. Trauma. Unprocessed trauma can really destroy the immune system's ability to fight infection. I was already much more vulnerable to getting sick leading up to my workout in Africa. And so that illness kind of was a linchpin in really me going within and starting to recognize, even if I get healed from this, there's some illness on the corner, right? Like I got my gallbladder removed during that period. I developed type 1 diabetes. Like my body was shutting down on a multitude of levels that existed just beyond this African illness, right?
That sounds like a story wrought with suffering. But during your description of that, you mentioned the word trauma several times, and you also used the word awakening. And I want to talk about that for a second. Like, how do those two things relate? Like, how does trauma relate to awakening exactly? And like, what is that dynamic about? Like, maybe it might help to define like what is awakening and as well, because this is kind of a multi-layered dessert, if you will.
So when we think of awakening, a spiritual awakening, we think of spirits or yoga, right? When I talk about awakening, I'm talking about becoming aware and conscious of the aspects of not only our internal environment, but also our external environment that we've been running away from, like that we've kind of been in disillusion from, right? We kind of lived out these programmed loops, right? We live within these boxes, these constructed personas that are almost given to us from our family, our culture, our society, right? And we bury everything that runs counter to these little narratives about ourselves in the world. And an awakening is just an experience where I think we're exposed to these aspects of the subconscious that we weren't aware of. And it's a very shattering experience because then we're like, it's this, and a lot more people are going through it of like, oh my God, who am I? What does matter to me? Right? What is the world? What is my place in this? I thought I was just this. And I realized I've been lied to myself, or I've come up in a way where I had to repress a lot of parts of myself that I wasn't even aware of. Right? And trauma is just like events or experiences that we weren't allowed to fully process and complete. So, it's like a little girl, not like, becoming a straight A student because, mom made her be a perfectionist because she was guilted and shamed for not being perfect, right?
Mm.
She represses all these things that run against that perfection. And that slowly builds and kind of explodes probably eventually into an awakening because she can't hold down all those things anymore, right? I hope I did a good job.
You did. You gave an example. What I want to ask is, what did that early process look like for you, and how did you start realizing that you were going through that awakening process?
Mm. I just became aware that, like, first off, the fancy law school scholarship, having all these things I was told I needed to attain after being a high school dropout and being shamed for not being like an upstanding citizen of society. And so then, and going that direction and attaining all those things and realizing this still doesn't feel right. Like, this isn't creating the inner fulfillment and happiness I was told it was going to bring. And then getting kind of into that legal institution and realizing like these were just a bunch of kids that were really good at following rules and actually really couldn't think for themselves. Like, there was just a, a different perception of what it was supposed to be, right, relative to what it was. And then you start going down the rabbit hole of a little bit like, what other ways have I lied to myself or have I been suppressing things, right? And so when one perception of reality is shattered, then many other perceptions of reality get shattered. And so then you start tracing things back to childhood, you start tracing things back to adolescence, right? You start questioning the world itself and the messages we've been given from all those around us. And somewhere along the way, then you can even become exposed to the esoteric aspects of our reality, the multidimensional nature of our reality. And that's when we kind of look into the aspects of shamanism, right? And so I became aware that, like, I wasn't alone in this in the guidance of my life, and that was actually a shattering thing for me, that there were things that I could not perceive that were somehow guiding my experience, right? And that wasn't comforting. It meant I wasn't in control. So the illness, the way that everything had kind of been layered or whatever, I was like, this isn't by accident, but holy shit, what do I do with this, right?
So where does this process lead us exactly? Because it sounds like a natural process and evolution of growth and identity. We shatter this somewhat limiting ideal or idea of self, this persona, but where does this lead us exactly? Where does the growth process go?
Into the shadow, I believe, which is, Carl Jung, in terms of all the parts that we've repressed from ourselves until we get into that core being, that core who we truly are, that transcends the narratives about ourselves, that transcends the stories we've been given or we're giving ourselves, right? And then figuring out how this authentic self wants to express itself through the vehicle of Elijah or through the vehicle of Zach, right? It's not just about finding your true self. It's about also kind of finding the components of you, of this life that mix in with this core being so that you can show up authentically and be rooted in your truth, be rooted in what you truly are, right?
This is
Sovereignty, it is freedom.
the reclamation of ourself, and we're free from guilt and free from the limiting ideas that we've created.
And aware of ourselves, aware of the mechanisms that are running us and how to interact with those mechanisms appropriately, right? Like how to interact with shame, with our internalized shame appropriately, right? How to work with our internalized rage appropriately, rather than just suppressing it or just reacting to it.
I think it was Jung that said, until we make the unconscious conscious, we're bound to be a slave to it, or something to that degree.
Yep.
But I found that to be very, very true in my own life. And you've been a pivotal part of facilitating that process, because you do bring this awareness very well. So I appreciate that deeply.
Yeah.
So help me wrap my head around this. Why in 2022 why with COVID, with Ukraine, with Afghanistan, with global warming, why are you focusing your attention on this? And why is this important right now?
It's a great question. You're gonna have a future in this for sure. Um, what created these issues? What created someone like Vladimir Putin rising into power? What created where we're not connected to the earth, where we're literally exhausting every resource with no concern for the future or our relationship of how we harmonize with our environment, right? Because we have a bunch of people in power who aren't aware of the subconscious mechanisms that are running their decision making, right? Most of our politicians, and this comes from someone who went to that law school, are heavily traumatized and not aware of how their trauma is even impacting the way they show up in the world, right? So we can become very external focused, and we should be, right, in terms of addressing these matters. But also it takes a balanced perspective in terms of looking within and understanding, like, if we continue to look at the parts of ourselves that are putting these people in power, right? And we decide, and we work differently in terms of redefining ourselves on a collective level, suddenly these issues slowly stop happening as much, right? An internal revolution leads to an external revolution.
Help me understand what that means exactly.
So by addressing the ways we lie to ourselves internally, by becoming healthy internally, a healthier external reality will manifest from that, right? This is a little bit of, I don't want to, because it's very simplified in the spiritual community, like really fucking simplifies the concept. But, our external reality sometimes can be a projection of what's going on for us internally, right? So by addressing the issues we have within us on a collective level, we can start more consciously creating an external reality that is healthier, right? If we're disconnected from ourselves, then we're disconnected from the earth, right? And we're disconnected from others. So by gaining a connection to ourselves, we're able to have a more harmonious relationship with our communities and with the world at large, and that will show itself through policy and other things.
Oh, God, that's beautiful. So I think we've talked about this book before, but it recently came into my radar again, The Wounded Healer. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. You should definitely check this book out. But there's a quote in it that says, "What is most personal is what is most universal." Now, I've found in my own experience that when I connect, when I go inward and express in writing, in content, and whatever it is that is most personal to me, and I share that with other people, that is what people most connect with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this shared narrative or this shared logos that we all connect to, that shared awareness. Like, it's very cheesy, I think, to say, we're all one, but in a very real physical sense, maybe not physical, but metaphysical sense, we are all one. How do you demystify that? Like, how do you take the woo-woo out of this?
That's the really difficult part. I think we're still figuring that out, right? Because in this reality, we are experiencing separateness. Like, you do have to look out for Elijah the person. I have to look out for Zachary the person. But understanding that the way we operate intersects with everyone, and that we are here, like, we are all intertwined consciously, right? I mean, that's what's so hard, is you can't really give it language, this concept of oneness. That's why many of our spiritual and religious leaders spoke in parables and metaphors, right? So grounding that is just that true fulfillment. I think true joy and happiness comes through experiencing oneself to the interrelation of others. How our actions and behaviors interact and intersect with the well-being of others, and creating a harmonious relationship with community. And I do think that's a disconnect from the spiritual community, which has been heavily commercialized at this point, of me, 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 me. How can I manifest this car or whatever, when it's really about how we form a healthy interrelation with everyone that's around us, right?
Well, I do think that dovetails really well into kind of what I find myself making more content and writing about, is that relationships. Because I'll say personally, I've gotten into the relationship space just talking with a bunch of other men, understanding really what the problems people are going through, because I've recognized that relationships have a unimaginable capacity for suffering, to create suffering in our lives, but also an immeasurable capacity to create joy and add value to our lives and add connectedness and help us find ourselves. But sadly, people err on the yin side, if you will, too much chaos. And I think especially men today are going through a real interesting time in transition in the culture when it comes to relationships. Do you think there's any relevance, or what role do relationships play in the healing process that you've observed in your own life?
They'll mirror everything back to you. So like, healing can't happen in isolation. It can't, right? And so there's this notion within the wellness community of like, don't get in a relationship until you're perfect, until you're fucking Jesus. And you're never really going to fully heal until you're really encountering and interacting with someone on an intimate level. And you're seeing where that discord and conflict keeps erupting and arising, right? Relationships are a way to bring about just love, fulfillment, intimacy, connection, and they will also show us the wounded aspects of ourselves that we may be running from, that we're looking to fulfill that need through a relationship in unhealthy ways, right?
Are you saying that the people that we end up with in that romantic relationship mirror back to us the kind of trauma that we have in ourselves?
Yeah. So, I mean, if intimacy was not safe for you growing up, and so then when you're with a romantic partner and you start getting into the deeper layers of intimacy, those blocks to intimacy will arise. Those feelings of vulnerability is unsafe will arise. Those feelings of I can't trust this person will arise, and you'll have to confront them finally. And you may not have confronted them through any other vehicle other than a romantic relationship or a very deep friendship.
I found that to be very true in my own life. There's a lot of attachment styles are pretty trendy right now.
Oh yeah, I know. Everyone's personality is now just their fucking attachment style, right?
It's another identity and another label. Yes. Yeah. So what are some of the issues that you see in your practice and in your line of work facing men right now as it pertains to relationships? Like, what are some of the most common threads or the most popular ones?
I think a lot of men have been energetically castrated, including myself. And the patriarchy, I think, eats itself alive. Right? Like, men have been in a position of kind of exerting too much power and oppression and force upon the feminine. Right? And I think we're seeing this sometimes overcorrection, even with the way that mothers raise their sons. Of men have been unsafe, and my boy's going to be a nice, happy, sweet little boy. And so any sign of aggression or assertiveness is repressed. And so I see men come into relationships and they don't necessarily know what they want or what they need, and they're just trying to appease and just gain approval and a sense of self and worth from the romantic relationships.
Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah. Or I see also the polar opposite of the fuckboy mentality, right? Which is, I'm just gonna sleep with a bunch of women and I don't care. And that's also another thing of just the other flip side, the other shadow side of that, right? The polarity of just intimacy is unsafe and I just gain value from where you go.
I'm still here. It's my camera is I think it has a 30-minute limit or something like that, where it has to restart every once in a while. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's I see men afraid to have conflict and know how to lead in relationships, and that's been a problem within myself too. right? That if a woman expresses frustration with us, it's like we recoil and we like, how do we fix it, right? Rather than just like, where is our ground? Where is our needs, right? And that's how we can even get as men into toxic relationships. There's this heavy focus in the wellness community, rightfully so, about how men can be toxic or narcissistic in relationships, but that happens on the other end too. I've seen a lot of men come into relationships with very self-centered and self-absorbed, whether you want to call it the feminine women, whatever, right? I know we're all supposed to use different terms these days, but I don't know, for the sake of this fucking conversation, we're just going to say women, right?
This is a non-politically correct space here.
Yeah, whatever. The fucking their feminine partner, okay, whatever it is, okay. They come into contact with someone who is toxic themselves because they don't know how to stand their needs, and they're being emotionally manipulated a lot of times as well too. So I'm going a little bit of circles, but just basically men not knowing how to really understand what their needs are, what their boundaries are, how to assert them, and how to lead in a way that's healthy, right? How to not explode on your partner because you're upset, how to channel that anger and rage and be firm and assertive and say, hey, I didn't respect this. This is where I want to go, right? And find that middle ground between like the explosive, the explosive little boy or the recoiled, like, I just want to hide a little boy, right?
There's a lot of value in what you just said there. But you mentioned two kind of like archetypes, like the nice guy and the fuck boy, if you will. I want to talk about those for a second, particularly from the standpoint of like what causes that from like a trauma perspective as it relates to the relationship with the mother at her early age. Because I had put a post out recently, and we were talking about that briefly before we hopped on here, about the mother wound.
Yeah.
How does that play into those two archetypes? I think it's really valuable for men to understand exactly what the mechanics of that are.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And I think it's very multi-layered, but at like as a simplistic level as we can talk about, if there was like a lot of enmeshment growing up with a mom, so like mom kind of lived vicariously through you, and mom wouldn't let you, like you were a mama's boy, right? And mom loved you, but mom didn't want you to have like do something that made her feel uncomfortable. Mom didn't want you to do something that made her feel upset, right? It was kind of about mom's emotional state, right? And the son had to kind of just gear his behavior around that. He'll become very codependent in relationships with the feminine when he's older. So he'll seek out women and kind of just acquiesce to their needs and be hyper vigilant to figuring out what they want while betraying himself, right? And that's actually not attractive to a woman in the long run, right? And then in terms of the fuck boy, tends to be, I see more of like a deep abandonment by the feminine, of like a betrayal by the feminine, right? Like a mom that was very, very critical and harsh with the child, or just very neglectful. And so never grew up with like really feeling respect towards the feminine, and almost kind of wanting to take out that anger by hurting the feminine the way the feminine hurt them, right? And then society rewards that behavior too, of like, we give each other high fives with the more women that we sleep with or whatever too. So it's a rewarded trauma response too.
I definitely fall into that nice guy category. I think when we first started working together, you were helping me understand that dynamic playing out in a specific time in my life.
Yeah.
What do you think about casual sex? What is your take on that? I'll leave that intentionally open-ended.
You can't box it into like a good or bad. I don't want to do that or whatever. I think it has its place. You just have to be understanding the intention behind it, right? Like there have been moments where I felt called to kind of engage in it, and it was just more so like, am I just doing this to really just because I don't want to confront something within myself, or I'm scared of intimacy and just kind of want to rush it, right? So I think it has its place, but I think oftentimes we use casual sex as a way to run from certain things within us, right? But sex is so, on an energetic, spiritual level, so multi-layered. Like sometimes you are supposed to just have that you know, that sexual experience with that person a few times, and it's not supposed to be a long lasting relationship because there is an energetic connection that just needs to be seen for a little bit. Right. So it is difficult to box just that concept in of a rule. Right. And trying to be like, you know, the Bible.
Case by case is kind of like where you're approaching it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I didn't have, too many questions, and I've exhausted my list here, but I'm just enjoying kind of where this is going because I think this leads into some really juicy places that we could go here.
Yeah, for sure.
Given what we've talked about thus far, is there anything particular? Is there any direction that you'd like to lead this? Because I think you have some very valid and strong and valuable opinions about this whole topic, particularly about relationships, but also trauma and healing. I'll kind of let you steer the boat here for the time being.
No, I mean, like, trust me, man, I am not the guru or oracle on anything. I fuck up on these aspects of my life all the time. I'm incredibly messy and I screw up, this, whatever. Like that's part of like my learning experience is like, I fail a lot and I learn. And I think we need to continue to encourage people to fail and to make mistakes and to slip up. I think everyone we live in the social media era, and I participated in it for a while of trying to create that perfected image. And if you have a heavy history of trauma, you have a twofold thing going on. Like sometimes the trauma exists because you've been told to project an image of perfection to the outside world, while at home you were going through a lot of shit. And so that's where we really start erecting these false masks and personas. So I think what people are begging for right now isn't to be this fully healed buttercup of like, I experience a state of bliss and I go to Fiji and I go to this and look at my fucking past and mouth. It's a very privileged, disconnected view, I think, for a majority of times. I think people just want the permission to be their authentic selves and to allow themselves to be messy at times, but to deal with that mess that is authentic to them and not overly exerting pain or abuse onto others. Right. You see me on social media, I'm fucking messy.
But that's what I appreciate about you, because I think that if we talk about suffering that we've not experienced, it comes off as inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
And you own that, and that's why I've always supported and followed you for so long, because I appreciate that, because there is a thread and a narrative going on in social media today, it seems, where people do project a very clean, a very perfect image. I think that destroys people's self-esteem when people scroll through social media. They compare their highlight reel. It's that cheesy cliche. People compare their highlight reel to their day-to-day, and that's just not a fair thing. But it's like culturally, we're supporting this too. It's like we're incentivized to do these kinds of things because we reward this behavior with likes, with money, with validation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and the messages that can get programmed into us through social media can be very destructive and be very inconsistent with what we feel on an internal level. And I think you probably witnessed, I was very open about this on social media, and it probably looked erratic from the outside, and I am a little erratic. But I was trying to live up to this image of creating this life that I was told I should create as someone who was successful in the wellness sphere, which was like, I was about to move to Tulum. Right. I was going to Costa Rica. Right. I was around very pretty women. I was kind of doing the whole shtick and making lots of money from my wellness stuff. And it felt inauthentic to me, and it felt a little dirty, and it didn't feel like it resonated with me. And, the week leading up to moving to Tulum, just making sure my mic is good. Hello. Yeah. Okay.
Clear.
We're good. Yeah, we're good. I just started having like anxiety attacks, and I was like, this isn't resonant with me. Holy shit. And I did a quick, just canceled everything and just moved back to Philly where I grew up, and was like, fuck, I'm going to wait tables and bartend for a little bit. I don't even give a shit. And fuck the image. Like, fuck all that. Like, I just want to be around people who are grounded and real. And that's what resonates with me. Like for some people, like the moving to Austin, Texas to take the ice plunge baths or whatever, right, and to sit in those little kumbaya sessions or whatever, that's actually really cool for them. Like that's right for them, right? For some people want to just go surf in Hawaii and stuff, and that's good for them too. But like there's not one way to do this thing, right? If I want to go to Philly and fucking pour drinks while I shoot the shit about whether James Harden is going to carry the Sixers to the title this year, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Nope.
No, you're gonna fucking see me. They're killing it. All right. Him and Embiid are a perfect mix. All right. So pick and roll, bro. So it's social media creates this picture that I think we're all trying to attain that actually may not resonate with a lot of us. Right. I kept trying to live up to the tall white spiritual coach person narrative and what that image was supposed to look like. Right. And I started recognizing like, yo, my background is fucking way different than theirs. And actually as a person, I'm way different than them. Right. And that doesn't mean they're necessarily doing anything wrong, even though I just like to talk shit because I'm from the East Coast. So that's kind of where I see this is really like this process is really finding like what the fuck is true to you. And I don't see that. And that message on social media doesn't necessarily a lot of times go in that direction. Right.
What is your advice to someone who, let's say, is experiencing that misalignment in their life right now? Like there's this, they're comfortable, right? Relationship might be good, job might be okay, health might be okay, everything's okay, but it's not thriving. It's not, what they imagine that they could be. It doesn't feel, there's rumblings of misalignment there. What is your advice to someone who's in that place right now?
Well, so you're basically describing all my male coaching clients. Be willing to blow some of your life up. You're never really going to find your answers in that contentment and comfort. Right. So be willing to like ask the hard questions. Be willing to really step outside and meet your edge. Right. Whether that's saying fuck it and taking a month leave from work to travel for a little bit, or just doing something different. Maybe it's taking a breaking relationship. Maybe it's expressing a need in your relationship that you feel like hasn't been fulfilled. Be willing, if you start feeling that just internal like I'm just dragging, which is what I was feeling even in this. I was told once you hit the certain point in the coaching sphere, you're gonna be yippee, right? And you're gonna post the pretty Instagram pictures. And I still felt those rumblings. I'm still even now, still not fully listening to what I need. Still not fully being in my truth. So, really tapping in and being willing to take a leap. Right. We have conflicting messages with our parents' generation and our generation, right? And there's nothing wrong with how they experience reality, but their reality is different than us, especially at the times we're in. Of get a job at a corporation, work for 40 years, get the promotions, do the white picket fence thing. And that may not be what we're here to do right now. That may not be sustainable. That may get us lulled, put us in a lull state that we can't be in right now, because our world is asking us to shift society in a different way so that we can make a world that allows 7 billion people to coexist in a harmonious way. And we're not doing that right now. So you may have to bop around and do things that are a little unstable for some time.
I think that's pretty excellent advice. Shortly after I worked with you, I ended up moving across the country to Portland, Oregon. Which ironically was very close to one of the places that you suggested. We won't get into that. But it was one of the most freeing things. I had no job lined up, and it was scary because I had a limited amount of savings. I was able to have my parents co-sign on an apartment for me. And that was it, basically. And it was just like, I got 5 months to kind of just figure my shit out. Yeah. But I will tell you, it's the most freeing and courageous thing. it's never the comfort that or the contentment I think that we should chase. It's the living on the edge between your comfort zone and what is unknown, what is beyond there. Like that is where the maximum amount of growth occurs in my own experience. I'm sure you can probably relate to that in many, many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And your story's not very different from my own or what a lot of people I work with do. Right. And it's a very empowering experience to do what you did. Right. That is something that molds men to say, fuck it. I'm gonna build it my own. I'm not going to necessarily rely on the system. I'm not necessarily going to rely on mommy and daddy or whatever, right? I'm going to go somewhere new and find my way. It's part of the reason I moved back to Philly again. I'm like, yo, can I not be a coach eventually and do something artistic and find my way, right? It is these challenges that pull us into the discomfort and make us shed these aspects of ourselves that are limiting our full authentic expression and from showing up in the world in our full truth.
I'll ask a leading question here, but it's kind of like it needs to be asked. Do you think that people avoid discomfort?
Our whole society and our whole economy is based around avoidance. We are literally programmed to avoid discomfort, right? TV, drugs, everything, right? If there's some part of us that we don't like, it's all about numbing. I mean, look at the psychotropic, psychopharmaceutical industry. If you feel sad, take a pill. Not that there's not room for antidepressants, not that they can't be beneficial in many circumstances, but it's like sometimes you need to be fucking depressed. Sometimes you need to lose your shit and be angry, right? Sometimes you need to be encased in shame and feel like you're the worst fucking person in the world. Sometimes we're not supposed to numb and distract ourselves away from that. Sometimes it's an experience being called to be seen and experienced fully, right? But we have all these mechanisms that are constantly designed of, oh, if you feel just do this, right? We're constantly looking for, our bodies and our minds are wired in Western society to avoid discomfort. I see it in myself. I'm in an eternal struggle all the time.
Ditto.
Yeah. Right. And this has been spoken about in science fiction novels, like dystopic science fiction novels for like the last couple centuries about where we were headed. Brave New World talked about this kind of, psychological pharmaceutical like society where whenever you got sad, just take a happy pill. You never have to be unhappy. There's a pill for that. Right. And you just watch a bunch of gray blobs just run through society. There's no artistry. There's no beauty in the world anymore. Right. Sometimes it's that pain that transmute. Like most of our greatest artists went through the most fucked up shit. It's that pain that can be transmuted into the polarity of that, which is beauty. And we're losing the color in society through just sitting in contentment.
What is the way out of this? This numbed out, doped up, sedated society or incentive structure that we've created for everyone? Because I don't believe that it starts by starting a revolution out in the streets.
Starts by starting a revolution internally. What am I afraid of? What parts of me scare me? Right? Where am I using my job or my relationship to avoid certain things within me? Right? Am I always just constantly hyper-focused on my partner's needs because I'm afraid to recognize within myself, I don't know what my needs are? Right? Asking these simple questions within ourselves, like that's been my process of like, I had to just go in for a few years. I really had to go within internally. I wasn't out in the streets doing jack shit. But as a process of that, of coming into contact with these layers of myself, now I'm starting to feel more comfortable talking about the issues in their external, like in our society, talking about like current global affairs, like using my background in economics and political science to talk about these things, right? Because I feel comfortable with that it's coming from an authentic place, right?
One of the things that I've started to write a lot about and advocate on some of my videos is being very crystal clear on what it is that you value, what in exactly what it is that feels in alignment for you. Because when we know what we value, decisions become very easy to make.
Mhm.
People
Yeah.
belabor decisions because they're unclear on what's most important to them.
I love that. I agree.
Yeah.
But many of us never even had to ask ourselves that question. Was that an exercise we went through in school? Really, ever? Were we ever taken through, like, in between learning, what year this war took place and what the fuck the Pythagorean theorem is? Did we ever actually get taken into our internal worlds to learn what felt right in terms of our own values and principles? Or we just did we adopt our parents because that's what we were told to do?
Well, the goal of first grade, Zach, is to get to second.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of ninth grade is to get to 10th.
And then we get the undergrad degree, and then we get the master's degree, right? And then maybe there's a PhD, and then maybe we start in an entry level position, right, within fucking Geico, and then we keep going. And we wonder why men are nearly 4 times more likely to commit suicide. We wonder why men have higher rates of drug addiction, right? We wonder why there is a mental health crisis going on amongst men, because we have dudes who are literally probably have been Vikings almost every incarnation, and now they're stuck in a fucking cubicle on an Excel sheet, right? And we wonder why, like, men are either having explosive expressions of rage or are recoiled like feminized little things, right? We've never had this space held for men to have this authentic expression really of themselves in society. We're scared of it, rightfully so, because it hasn't been handled appropriately for some time. There's a little bit of tangent, but I do think the masculine feels recoiled and does not know how to exist within modernized Western society effectively or efficiently.
I would probably agree. It's the balance between overly tyrannical and overly soft, or overly watered or watery or flowy or feminine.
Yeah. And it's because, like, from a certain level, we're just being told what to do. Like I said, this isn't the feminine doing this to us. This is us doing this to us, right? Of growing up in these rigid, like, first grade, go to second grade, go to third grade. Never go within and ask the questions, right? If you don't like what the teacher said, or you don't think this lesson is applicable, still sit down and shut up, right? And so then we become numbed out robots.
This sounds so bleak. So again, I come to the question, what do we do? What the hell do we do with this?
I think we're doing it. I think we're starting to have these conversations, right? I think I think the fact that we're becoming aware of nice guy syndrome, like, I think that the feminine is calling us out. I think collectively the feminine right now is more conscious than the masculine. And they're starting to say, like, guys, we need you to fucking lead too. Right? We're tired of being in our masculine because you guys don't know where your own needs and boundaries and how to assert yourself are either. Or you're domineering us. Right? So we're like the feminine's starting to call us up. Right? Men collectively are starting to feel something's not right. And so I think it's a slow tiered thing of slowly beginning to confront the aspects of ourselves that men before us weren't able or willing or didn't have the tools to confront. And then we're going to see what the externalization of that looks like. Hopefully it's not more of these fucking alt-right movements, because I think that's going a little sideways.
The balance between tyranny and boundarylessness. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we have a problem with that.
There's this Buddhist principle, or word, and I don't recall the word exactly, but it translates to like something according to like the middle way. It's not too far left, not too far right, not too far up, not too far down.
I think it's even in the Quran, like all these religious scriptures, they really are expressing the same message, just to that certain, period of time and culture, where I think that it's about finding the middle road, but that middle road is narrow, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. And I think as the masculine, we're trying to find that narrow middle road right now, and we're having a lot of difficulty doing so.
So one of the things that I've found incredibly helpful for me, and perhaps you'll relate to this in a different way, but it's having communities of men come together and express what it is they're going through vulnerably. One, my question is, how effective do you or needed do you think that is? And two, how do men go about creating those spaces and environments where there is safety and emotional intimacy among other men?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest with you, man. Like, there are tons of parts of me that are scared of other men because vulnerability was so shamed growing up for us, right? I grew up around men. If we were ever angry, upset, we threw a brick through like an abandoned house, right? Like that's how we did stuff. We didn't express it. And so I'm in something called like the Rising Man movement, which is like an online, just circles for men. It's just, we're there just expressing what we're going through, right? And it's not overly like, oh, but it is like difficult emotions will come up, and like allowing yourself to be seen in that is really important, right? I feel like men feel they can only have expression of their emotions around the feminine or around their, and so you have men who, and this has been a case for me, have too many female friends or put too much pressure on their female partner, right? And I've learned through my process, I'm learning, and many men are too, that you need to have, fortunately, like intimate masculine relationships to be able to have healthy relationships with the feminine.
Completely agree. That's a very common symptom, is putting your partner on a pedestal or being overly dependent emotionally on your partner, because we find ourselves so devoid of male contact, or of human contact for that matter. Guys generally seem very isolated today. At least that's been my experience, especially with COVID.
Oh yeah, I mean, when men are going through stuff, they hide. I know this with some of my closest male friends, and I've done it a lot too. Of like, we're going through shit, suddenly it's just, oh yeah, we're fine, bro. I just haven't been, I just haven't been feeling good, and you're wiped off the map for 2 weeks. Men feel that any expression of doubt or sadness or regret makes them weak. And so we need a whole space where that can be validated by other men.
Working with you back in, we started in 2019, I think. I talk about it still, but like that was some of the scariest, but most helpful and supportive healing that I've had in my entire life. Because it's the first time that I don't want to say in a formal environment, but that I was vulnerable in front of another man fully.
Yeah.
And it took me up until the age of 23, 22 to do it. Like, I think that's a big problem.
And you started really young.
Thank God for that.
Some men don't hit it until they're 50, 60. Some men go their entire life. How many of us who had fathers who will be buried in the ground, never having a vulnerable thought or emotion expressed? Right? It happens, and I appreciate you relaying that to me, because it was a similar experience for me with my real first men's mentor. It's the first time where I felt I could just let out those little kid cries in front of a guy, and him being like, dude, you're good. You're fucking fine. I'm not a, like, I'm sorry, but like, I'm not a pussy, right? Because those are the words we grew up using, right? Not even saying it's correct. It's like, nah, dude, it's part of life. And so it's this chain reaction of, now you felt comfortable having that expression in front of me. Right now, you're going to be able to hold that space for other men to have that expression. They're going to feel comfortable to hold space for that other expression in front of their male friends or potentially clients. And it's a pay it forward type thing. And that's how the masculine then tends to be connected to their authentic self. We're no longer domineering our environment.
Yes. It deepens our capacity for emotional integrity.
Mm-hmm.
My bad.
No, you're good.
This camera is, I need to get a new camera.
You're good, man.
There we are. No, it deepens our capacity for emotional integrity, and I think that's the relation. One of the relationships that the masculine has with the feminine is that it's like, if this cup is the masculine, it has to have integrity in it in order to hold the liquid inside of it, because the liquid will eventually pour out of any hole or crevice or leak when it lacks the integrity. It's the container for the feminine energy, and when so I think the reason so many women today find themselves unsafe in the presence of men is because that container in the man lacks the integrity to hold the feminine, and so they fall into this fear-based state. The feminine, I mean, falls into a fear-based state of becoming hard and masculine.
Yeah.
It's like a polarity switch that we see happening today, where women are taking on more masculine qualities and behaviors, and vice versa.
And I couldn't agree. I think that's a great analogy to use. Holy shit! Just fucking make that into a post. My lord, I'll get shit. But one of the things that I've had to normalize for men is that when you go on this self-healing journey, or growth journey, whatever you want to call it, right? I always make jokes, but like, you discover your life purpose. Whenever you go through one of these journeys, you have to experience the holes to begin to heal, to begin to to patch up the holes correctly. You have to go in and experience them. So like, I see the disconnect that I see that I have with what I see in mainstream men's work or whatever, is that like, it's these teachings. This is what the healthy masculine looks like. Go be it. And it becomes an intellectual exercise of like, well, I have to be firm and grounded, and my feet have to be like this, and I have to open the door, and it becomes a robotic exercise. But what ends up happening as a male, you're once again doing what you've always been doing. You're suppressing parts of yourself to carry out an image, right? To really get that healthy masculinity energy is going to look so different in every fucking man, right? It is not going to be a one-way thing. That's why my coaching containers tend to be chaotic. Right? It had to be all over the place. Okay. Because that is this journey. It is nonlinear. So like, you may have to, as my part of my journey is I had to feel like a scared little boy a lot of times. That didn't look super masculine. That doesn't look super attractive, right? When I'm trying to take out like, the models and stuff. Right. But that's what I'm experiencing. That's what I'm experiencing right now. That's the part of me I had to suppress. And no, I don't. And we learn to not project that and let that spill out all over the place on others. We learn how to harness and contain that in environments that are appropriate. But for a while on a journey, part of coming into healthy manhood is being messy for a while. It's feeling scared. It's acknowledging your fear for once. As a men, we're told to suppress all our fears because it's not manly. Fucking be afraid. And then go do it anyways. Right? Be angry. Feel like you're being taken advantage of. Feel like a victim for a little bit. Don't indulge in it though. Right? Don't let it take the wheel. But allow it to be experienced. So now it's no longer running from the subconscious. You like, the journey to healthy manhood is not just, oh, I have learned and now I am a healthy man. Like, that's the very fucking, privileged white mentality. Like, if you've been through a shitload of trauma and you're trying to be a healthy man, it's going to be an excavation. Right? Like, when someone is exploring new territory, when you're trying to establish new territory, like in a physical environment, right? Let's say Lewis and Clark do Louisiana Purchase. I don't fucking know. Right? There were days they went hungry. There were days they smelled. Right? There were days that, there was an arrow shot at them. Okay. It wasn't just like, oh, I felt like it's dirty. It's messy. This excavation to get into the healthy man. We have to normalize that the journey to being a healthy man means being sometimes the opposite of what it is to be a healthy man, to work to experience those parts of you and integrate them so that then you know how to be the authentic, full embodied version of you and not just a caricature. That was a tangent, man. Oh, shit.
That was great, man. I love that. There's great truth in the words that you speak.
Yeah.
And I hope that men are able to take that in. Another thing, it's it runs tangential to what you were saying, but you don't ever make it. Like this process never ends. Like there's no point in time where you're going to reflect on your life and say, I have everything I need. I made it. I'm done. I'm fully baked. Like I think there's this marketing that seems to be present in today's world in media that someday you'll make it. I use that term loosely, but making it as in I won't have any more problems. Like that's not where you want to be to begin with. You don't want no problems.
No. Our greatest leaders throughout history, Lincoln, Mandela, these fuckers had problems. Shouldn't say fucker. These amazing men had problems up to the day they died. We're building resiliency. We're building your capacity to handle bigger problems. And that's where that discord with me, that's why I was having like almost a panic attack when I was about to move to Tulum. I was buying into the westernized notion of an end game, of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I was like, yo, this isn't supposed to be easy. I'm not just supposed to live and just create and just live out this experience of having some indigenous person serve me a pina colada every day on the beach, and this is the end goal. And that's the notion we're given. And maybe for some guys named, I don't know, John, right? That is it. But for me, it's like, yo, I'm going to go back into Philly. I'm going to go back in the dirt. Go back in the grime. Because I have greater resiliency now to handle these problems, and I can even do it more on a collective level. That's what this journey brought me. It isn't about me a lot of times. It's about how the fuck can I serve? And if you serve more deeply, more shit's going to arise. And this journey is really about your ability and capacity to handle more shit being thrown at you and be able to navigate it effectively. Right? That is the major problem that I have right now. Right?
Not attaining, but becoming.
There is no end. I attained the notion of being a successful coach, healer, or whatever, and I'm ready to throw it all away, because guess what? I'm still carrying a lot of internal pain. No matter what, like that, it's not like, oh, I healed. Now there's no pain. Now I'm just like, that's a manufactured social media version of this that sells well. Right? I know how to work with pain more. I know how to channel my pain more. And so for me, I was like, yo, I'm going to go be a comic and a rapper. Cuz that's a way to transmute that energy now. Right? Like the you that comes out on the other side may just be more autistic. Right? Maybe more of a community organizer. But there's still shit in that. Like Connie looks like he's going through a fucking, something. So
Poor guy.
Yeah, well, yeah, and poor Kim too.
It's complex.
It's very complex. Whatever. The one that seems he has it easy is Pete Davidson. So it's.
I agree.
Man, if I could be anyone, man, I'd incarnate in that body of Pete Davidson. That looks like a fun fucking experience. But yeah, no, man, it is a constant evolution. We're never done. Right. And like I said, we might have to realign our narratives about what the actual reward is from this journey, right? Any great movement or any great change, right, wasn't about this perpetual state of bliss and ecstasy, right? Those who are founding fathers in this country went through fucking hell. Those who led the abolitionist movement went through fucking hell, right? Did the Black Panthers, did those men in the Black Panthers, were they constantly like, oh my God, it's so great? Like, no, they were on the ground fighting every day for something. right? And so we may need to rewire our narratives about what it is we're actually here to attain and aim for.
That seems to me to be a very obvious readjustment that we need culturally. And that's why I'm so adamant about people getting very clear on what it is that is most important to them, because a lot of times we make short-circuited decisions that are very short-term or very much influenced by other people's ideas. And I think we're not even aware of how many ideas are floating through our head on a given day that aren't ours.
I love that point, because a lot of the thoughts being perpetuated inside our minds, and why it's really good to access your internal truth, they're not yours, right? And if you're in this if you're engaged in this wellness sphere, the messages you have in your head are, how do I attain the prettiest partner and show that? How do I attain this vacation, this material wealth, and show that? How do I attain this body of perfection, and show that? But like, when did the aim of like, could I utilize this journey to make sure that more kids have lunch, right, in inner city environments? Can I use this knowledge to make sure that people are receiving the health care they need? Can I use this knowledge to make sure that, like, someone doesn't go away for 10 years because they got addicted to fucking whatever drug because they didn't know how to deal with their emotions? Can we realign these systems for others? I don't know when the self-growth journey got away from that. Right? That's the problem I have right now. Somewhere along the way, we're forgetting that now.
I want to ask you a little bit more about what you're doing today. I want to be mindful of time,
Yeah.
but tell me what you're doing today, because I think you're not only talking about this, but from what I follow you, online, and we talk every once in a while. You're actually living it though. You're embodying this. Tell us what you got going on today, and what's popping lately.
Oh God. Okay. So I just moved to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is actually where I grew up. And I'm eventually going to move into like, the city in Philly or whatever. I just needed to get into the suburbs for a little bit to just ground myself. But I'm still doing men's coaching, but it's on a more limited basis, right? And so I have a next cohort of clients that I'm going to open myself up to soon, and then I'm done for coaching for a while. And I have something called the Healers Program, which gives people the tools and modalities to work on the level of the nervous system, to work with these inner child parts. I'm going to make it free now. So I'm in the process of continuing, like it's been developed. I've been doing it already with certain clients, but now I'm going to make it into an online self-guided thing. I'm going to make it free so everyone fucking has access to it, make it donation based, fuck my income. And then, yeah. And then, I got a job waiting tables right now at nights. Not that sexy, right? Not my former law classmates. Once again, probably laugh at me. First, I left to go be a Reiki healer. Now I'm waiting tables. But it's what I need right now, just to be around people in my hometown. It's grounding for me. And then I am going to explore the comedy and music thing for a little bit. That is where my journey is leading me. There's this notion that if you have a spiritual awakening, it has to exist in these containers of within like the spiritual community or the wellness spheres. And I really, really want to challenge that now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, can we bring these messages through other vehicles? Like, someone like Kendrick Lamar to me is very spiritual.
Oh yeah.
Right. Someone like, Dave Chappelle to me, very spiritual. Not even spiritual, but very awake, aware, conscious. Right. So how can I take this knowledge or who I am and channel it through a different vehicle that I think will reach people that would never have reached in the prism of the fucking self-help sphere on Instagram? I don't want to be fucking Tony Robbins.
my lord. Nothing against Tony. Ain't for me.
Yeah, it's become pretty watered down today. But I'm very happy to see you explore the edges and the boundaries and channel that energy in a very different and alternative way. I think that's very needed to mix it up.
And you're doing it too, right? You've been exploring music as well.
Oh yeah, got a couple songs out.
Oh, you gotta send them to me. Can't wait.
Yes, I will definitely do that.
I think the thing that we have to realize is that this journey is going to look different in every person, right? Like this journey could lead to someone who's an accountant getting into forensic accounting and being a better forensic accountant, right? It could lead you to, quitting your job in corporate America and go and be one of the best 7th grade teachers that could ever fucking exist in the Bronx, right? Like. So for me, that's kind of where this journey is leading. And I want to see other people kind of utilize this self-growth to kind of, if that's where they feel called to, like some people, we do need fucking yoga instructors and everything too. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the only way.
Well, I love and support that you're busting the lid on the preconceived notions about what a healing journey is supposed to look like, man. So I mean, kudos to you, brother. Keep on going. I have mad respect for you.
And kudos to you, man. You're doing it as well, brother. Like all love, dude. You're doing great. Good. I can't wait to see how this evolves for you.
Makes 2 of us. Well, man, I'm gonna be respectful of your time. Thanks so much for hopping on here today with me. I hope that we can continue to collaborate, whether that's in this forum or in a different forum. But I love creating with you, man.
Me too, man. I think this is the start of, many more endeavors.
I like to think so. All right, brother. Well, I will talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Until then, man.